We are going to be making our eggs Benedict today with a homemade hollandaise. There's different ways you can make hollandaise at home. This is not the traditional classic method, but this is a really good introductory method to making it, and it helps kind of foolproof some of the things that can go wrong a lot of the time for people. So, and it's pretty quick and easy this way, the way that we're going to make it. So those are kind of a couple of the tricky things of making eggs Benedict. It's one of my favorite breakfasts to go out and get, to let other people make it for me, because making hollandaise from scratch is, well, if you're making large batches of it, it can be kind of time consuming, but that's why we're doing this sort of quick method. And poaching eggs is a challenge. There are times I still fail miserably. It depends on the egg, it depends on the water, it depends on the acid content, it depends on a lot of things, poaching your eggs perfectly, but the point is to not worry about perfection. There's always going to be some foam off, and there's always going to be some straggly egg whites that you just have to deal with. But the way that we're going to do it, with a little bit of vinegar and a little swirl to the water, it really does help try to bring it all together and keep those proteins solid. So we've got our egg method. That's going to happen later, though. We want to make our sauce first, so we can set that aside. Because when the poached eggs are ready, that needs to be ready to go. We're going to have to serve from that point on. Otherwise, the eggs keep cooking the longer they sit, and then you have a not so beautiful runny yolk. Of course, depending on how you like your yolks to be cooked in your eggs, you can poach it longer. I'm going to go for the 3-minute length of time, but if you like it more well done, then go for the 5 to 6 minute length of time, and you'll have a nice well cooked yolk that way. I've got my toaster already ready with my English muffin. Partway through this process, I'm just gonna push that down so that it's ready to go. I have cooked off some regular bacon. I couldn't find Canadian bacon. I actually did try 2 stores, but near me, I guess we don't eat a lot of Canadian bacon in East Hollywood. So I have regular bacon, which is delicious. You can have sausage patties. Some people like to supplement that. You can definitely put spinach on your English muffin in between maybe your protein and the egg when we put it down. There's a lot of things you can play with here and kind of make it your own, which is why it's fun to learn how to make it for yourself. So I'm going to mute everybody just in case. That is what I have done. If you are using Canadian bacon, then all you have to do is warm it up on both sides in a skillet, or you can even wrap it in a paper towel and warm it up in a microwave if that's easier or preferable to you than getting another pan out and ready. You can just, but it's literally just getting it hot. All you're trying to do is kind of sear both sides until it gets nice and warm, or you can, like I said, just zap it in the microwave. If you're using regular bacon, you want that already cooked off. Turkey bacon is a good alternative. You can put in there, a little better for your heart. So don't think you're stuck on Canadian bacon. Like, if you don't like eggs Benedict just because of the Canadian bacon, then switch it to something else. Ham, just regular sliced ham, is a lot of people like that. So you can kind of play around there. If you don't like protein, or you don't eat meat in the morning, you don't eat meat at all, then just skip it, and you've got your hollandaise eggs, and spinach maybe would be a great supplement. You can get some iron. So this is a fun dish. Like I said, I usually save this for when I go out, but we're gonna end our breakfast series for this quarter with something a little fancy, which is kind of nice. I've got my 4 egg yolks already separated out. I saved my egg whites because that's really great to mix into a scramble or make some omelet or something. So don't throw those away. You can find a way to use them. I've got 4 tablespoons of butter that's going into this small pot. I'm going to get that going on a medium-low heat. I want it to melt, but I don't want it to melt so quickly that I'm not ready for it yet, because we need to get our eggs whisked really, really well. You want to get a lot of air into the egg yolks and get them really well beat and combined before we start adding any of the other ingredients, especially the hot butter. Once we do start mixing this, though, you kind of you just need to keep mixing, because if you add a hot liquid like the melted butter to your egg yolks and you're not whisking it constantly, you're going to cook the egg yolks and you'll have pre-scrambled eggs, which is not how you make a really good hollandaise. So, little trick, I'm putting a towel down on my cutting board. If it were a little damp, it would be even better, but this just helps my bowl as I'm gonna whisk it, whisk inside this bowl very, very fast and hard. So I kind of, the stability of the towel keeps this bowl from sliding all over the place a little bit. So I've got my 4 egg yolks and my whisk. I'm gonna go to town. We get a lot of arm workouts in this breakfast class, which is good. You can see that the egg yolks are that really dark, golden, kind of orangish yellow to start out with. And if you get farm fresh eggs, the fresher and nicer your eggs are, then the kind of more golden, deep orangey color yolk you're going to have. The paler yellow yolks are usually not the happiest chickens. Anyway, so you're whisking this a lot, like a lot. I want this to end up looking pretty pale yellow, actually. You're going to add in a lot of air, and it's going to change colors. We're going to kind of come away from the really dark jewel tone of that golden yellow, and we're going to kind of get into a more pale yellow, not super, super pale, but it is going to change color the more that you whisk it, and the more air that you incorporate, the more volume it gets. Definitely keep an eye on your butter. I've got mine on low so that it's not going to turn brown, but it is melting. I can kind of hear it bubbling, so I know that it's working. I want it to be completely melted and hot, but I don't want it to brown. So we're not looking for brown butter hollandaise, although that would be delicious. So as soon as it's melted, you can turn the heat all the way to low, or if your low doesn't go low enough, then turn it off. But when we start to whisk the butter in, it needs to be hot, not just like lukewarm melted butter. It needs to still be hot. That's important in this process. So if you have melted your butter and then it gets a little bit room temperature while you're doing other things, it's fine. Just turn it back on and get it hot again before you start to spoon it into the egg yolk mixture. So you can kind of see, I hope you can kind of tell, the color is lightening up a fair amount. The more that I keep stirring, the better incorporated it all is, and the less I'm going to have to try to add air later. I'm going to have a nice kind of thick, creamy hollandaise sauce. So this is where I want it. This butter is nice and hot. I'm going to turn it off. I need to add in my lemon juice, heavy cream, and salt and pepper to my egg yolks before I start whisking in the butter. That's going to be the last thing. So it says between 1 and 2 tablespoons of lemon juice. Really, it's kind of like how super lemony you like your hollandaise sauce. That's a preferential thing. I'm going for the maximum because I like a nice bright lemony hollandaise. Acid can also cook your lemon juice, your yolks, if you aren't super careful. So we're going to be whisking as we add in these things. So I'm doing 1 tablespoon of heavy cream. That helps keep it, oh, my spoon, my goodness. That helps keep it from kind of breaking. It adds a richness to it. It helps emulsify it and keep the sauce together after it's been heated up. We'll fix that later. My lemon juice, I'm going to do 2 tablespoons of that, but I want to be stirring it as I add it, which is why having that towel underneath helps, because the bowl kind of has to hold itself at this point for me. I'm going to pour in 1 tablespoon at a time and whisk it in just to ensure that I don't curdle my egg yolks. As long as you're stirring it, it should keep it pretty safe from that happening. And that's why we also need to stir it continuously as we add in our hot butter. Okay, so I've got my thing. I'm going to add a pinch of salt and a small pinch of pepper. Pepper is personal. You can always add a lot more, but the thing is you can always add a little bit of salt and pepper on top of the eggs and stuff when we serve it. So you don't necessarily have to think about all your pepper in the sauce. So I'm going to turn this on at full volume just for about 10 seconds to make sure the butter is very hot as I start to add it. Bubbling around the edges, it's still nice and melty all the way through. You get some butter solids that tend to rise to the top. If we were making this the traditional French way, we would be using clarified butter, which is where you melt the butter and skim off all of those milk solids that have come to the top. You skim that off and continuously skim it off and skim it off until you're left with pure clarified butter, which is basically what ghee is, Ghee, which is used in Indian cooking. It's a clarified butter. And it's great for cooking, and it's great for keeping certain things from burning because it's the milk solids that burn when you're cooking certain things. But for this quick method of hollandaise, we're going to avoid that. I'm going to do 1 spoonful at a time of the hot butter, whisking it the whole time. If we poured in all of the hot butter at once, it would be it would break our combination here, and it would like curdle the yolks a little bit. So I'm just going to, this is kind of hard to scoop out of. I'm glad that I'm learning these challenges. I'm going to pour in 1 tiny spoonful at a time, but not in a steady stream. Like I could just pour this in the whole thing, I guess, but I'm going to just do 1 spoonful at a time, let it all incorporate, whisk it in carefully. What we're trying to do, the hot butter emulsifying with the egg yolks, it's going to thicken. It's going to create a thick sauce. The kind of thickness that you get in a normal hollandaise. But if you aren't continuously stirring, that butter, instead of emulsifying with the yolks, is just going to break them, and then it separates, and all you get is like kind of curdled egg yolks and hot butter on top. And so to keep it from separating and to keep it from cooking itself the wrong way, we just got to keep stirring. Keep stirring. I'm only pouring in about a teaspoon at a time, like if I were dipping my spoon in and pouring it out. So if you have the ability to keep doing spoonfuls, then that's great. But if you can pour it carefully like this, then that's another method, because my pot here is a little too deep for me to get that spoon in without using both my hands. So you just keep stirring, keep whisking in. All of this butter needs to get in here. This is kind of the slow process, because I know I get impatient and I want to just kind of dump all the butter in, and then my sauce is ruined. So kind of keep going, as frustrating as it might seem, just 1 spoonful at a time. If it seems like your butter is getting too cool, you can always make sure that it's hot by putting it back on the flame. The bottom of my pot is still very hot, so I'm just kind of keeping the butter on the bottom where it's going to stay nice and hot. And then pouring in 1 spoonful at a time. You can do this in a mixer if you have a KitchenAid mixer with the whisk attachment, or you can do it even in a food processor with the blade going fast. I've known people to do that. There are specific recipes online of like food processor hollandaise sauce and food processor mayonnaise and things. So if you have a food processor but not a KitchenAid, then you can make a lot of traditional sauces. Just look up recipes that use the food processor, because they've worked it out for you on how much of this and how much of that you might want. This recipe would work in the food processor. I think the amount of yolks, you would just have to do the butter through the little feeding tube at the top and keep going from there. So we're going to put this back into the pot after we've gotten it all really well combined and made sure that it's not broken or separated, and heat it up for about 20 to 30 seconds, stirring it constantly, and that's going to help finish thickening it up a little bit. Okay, that's the last spoonful of my butter. Get this back on the heat. Just keep whisking, keep whisking. Mine is nice and smooth. It's very well mixed. There's no like broken little egg bits, or you can't see any darker colored cooked egg yolk, which you would see if there were a problem. It is a little thinner than I want, probably because I added that extra tablespoon of the lemon juice for flavor. So I'm gonna cook it out. Like I said, you want to do this anyway. You want to get it back onto the heat to get it back hot and kind of finish the thickening process. I'm going to go on a medium heat. Just keep whisking it. So really just about 30 seconds. If you count, you can count it off in your head. That's actually good because you want it to be there for as long as it needs to thicken. But you have to keep stirring or the egg yolks will just cook. Then you can set it aside. If it forms a little skin on top while it sets, waiting for us to finish the rest, you can just reheat it and like whisk it back in. I am going to turn my water on here in the back. I want to start getting that up to a boil. I've got that pot filled with about 3 inches. It's deep. You want to have a nice deep pool of water. All right. My hollandaise is nice and thicker, the consistency that I want. If as it sits, it gets too thick, which it might evaporate a little bit more, then I just add a little drop of that cream or a little drop of water, and it'll just bring it right back to life. But more importantly, that it's nice and emulsified. See how nice and creamy that is? Can you see that it sticks to the whisk? So it's a little bit like a custard, but without cooked yolks, which is very, very nice. I'm going to set that aside off heat. I don't want it to continue cooking on the bottom especially. Just going to let that set. I'm going to get this up front now. And I'm going to move the camera so the egg poaching process will be visible here. Okay. See, I still will need this knife. We're going to cut up some scallions for garnish, because like a little pop of color, like a little bit of green, that onion flavor goes a long way to making it taste even more savory and delicious. So a little bit of chives or scallions as a garnish is a really nice addition to eggs Benedict. So I've got my 2 eggs. I'm only going to be poaching 2. I'm making for 1 person here. And I've got my vinegar. Let's see. I think that's going to do. All right, so I'm bringing my water up to a boil, but we're not going to be cooking them in a boil. That would be boiled eggs, and they would be violently all over the place in your water. So we are going to get it, though, as hot as we can, and then turn it down to a simmer so that you can still see little bubbles, those kinds of little springs of bubbles that rise from the bottom, and little simmery bubbles, but a nice gentle simmer. And then we're going to add in our eggs. Adding in the eggs, I like to use a little measuring cup, because then I can like lower it right into the water, just kind of release it from its container. Cracking it right into the pot is like MasterChef method. You can try that, but most people recommend putting it like in a spoon or a little cup or a little dish or bowl, and you can kind of slide it out into the water a little bit more carefully. And lots of people have different methods of what to put in the water, what not to put in the water. We're using a little bit of vinegar. The acid component, I think that it helps to keep the egg whites from completely releasing themselves. And I think also the swirl that we're going to do in the water really helps with that. But you don't want like a violent swirl. That's not what we're looking for. We're just trying to go for a kind of, the water is moving in the same direction, and then we're going to let the egg go in the same direction, so that the water kind of keeps it all together as one unit, rather than hopefully hopefully the egg whites won't just go all over the pot. If you have very old eggs, and I know it's hard to tell because you get it at the grocery store, they should say the date of packaging on them, not just the sell-by date, but it really does depend on the brand or the company. The fresher they are, I think, the better they'll kind of hold themselves together. Old eggs tend to run a little bit more. The whites get a little bit more broken down, I think, over time. Also, the better the egg. So if it comes from a really good farm, then those egg whites are going to be like stronger proteins. So it just depends. It's not going to be all your fault. There's so many things that could go wrong or kind of play with you in the egg poaching process. That's why they make those little pans where you put water in the bottom and then you put your little dishes in and you poach your eggs, or they have little plug-in egg poachers. They have all kinds of gadgets that help you poach eggs perfectly. And if, you know, after trying this and practicing a couple times, you still don't like to poach your own eggs, then there is no shame in having a gadget to help you in the kitchen. I think rice cookers are, you know, one of the greatest inventions of all time. There are things that can help you, and if they help you and they make you feel better about eating poached eggs, then by all means, you know. I don't poach my eggs very regularly because it's difficult to do it right every single time. I don't work in a breakfast restaurant, and I don't do this every single day. Those people are amazing, and they can do this perfectly. I cannot. So we're going to do this together. It's probably been a couple of years since I've poached eggs. This is a fun memory for me. I'm going to just pour in about a capful of this distilled white vinegar, and you want it to just be plain white vinegar. You can use apple cider, I guess. That's a pretty basic vinegar without a whole lot of extra flavor that's going to change the water, but basic white vinegar is the preferred. A little bit of lemon juice too you could do, so it would be about a teaspoon of that. Some people recommend, I've heard baking soda in the water. I'm not sure what that would do. I know that if you're blanching things and you want them to stay really bright green, then a little baking soda can sometimes help. Some people think less water. Some people think putting it in a ladle and then just kind of putting that in the water and letting it like rise out of it itself. There's a lot of different tips and tricks that people will teach you. So if this method doesn't work for you so well and you want to find something different to try, I suggest doing that. You don't have to give up on poached eggs. There's lots of YouTube videos and recommended methods and stuff. So when I get this going, I want it to boil up so we can get moving. I'm going to put one of my eggs here in my little measuring cup serving scooper so that it's ready to go when the water is ready. For your first try, or if you're still getting the hang of poaching eggs, I suggest one at a time. It's kind of hard to keep them separate, keep them from like breaking into each other, or they cook at a little bit of a different pace because unless you have both of them already cracked into two separate cups and you put them in at the exact same moment, then the cooking rate is going to change. So one at a time, just to make sure that you can keep it under control as much as you can control any situation. So I'm going to, in the meantime, put my English muffin down in the toaster because my toaster, I don't know, it's adorably retro cute, but you have to do it like 2 or 3 times for it to toast anything. So that is happening. I've got my cooked bacon. We're gonna have to probably warm up, maybe thin out hollandaise for me, but it depends on how thick you got yours in the preheating process. Vinegar we're done with. I've got extra salt and pepper just in case for the seasoning, and then we're going to cut our scallions, and that is gonna finish it off. So we're really just in the cooking process here, waiting for this water. Should be ready pretty soon. Those little bubbles were already starting to form. If I haven't mentioned this in the breakfast class before, I'm not sure. I know I've said it in a couple other classes. If you're boiling water and you have a lid on a pot, or anything that's cooking under a lid in a pot and it's hot, lift the lid up and away from you so that any of the steam or hot bubbling liquids or anything like that might avoid your hand and your face. And then it's always kind of good to let the pot lid drip off over the pot before you go put it somewhere else, because there's likely going to be a lot of condensated water, up to the top of the lid. So that I can see a lot of little bubbles starting to happen at the very bottom. We're about 30 seconds away from a boil, which is exciting. And I've got a glass bowl here. It can be anything, a ceramic bowl, a plate, even just something to put your poached eggs into, since we're doing them one at a time. If you want to live life on the edge and do 2 at a time, that is fantastic. Just still make sure you have something you can put your eggs into. Using a slotted spoon, my slotted spoon is not that great. It's kind of one of these shallow, it's more like a spatula spoon. It's not very deep. So I also have my little spider here. This is a small spider used sometimes for getting things out of fryers, like you can get all of the debris out of a fry machine, or it's just used to skim things because it's in very, very fine mesh. So if I were skimming foam off of a big pot of melted butter to make a large batch of clarified, these kinds of spiders are really great to have. They're cheap. I got this at like a kitchen supply store for 99 cents. So if you see it at a store, I recommend adding one to your kitchen collection. Small or large spiders are nice to have. So that is nearby, so that when the eggs are ready, I am ready for them. If you put your eggs in and then go, oh my God, where am I going to put it when it's cooked? And then you go try to find something, you could overcook your egg in the meantime. Okay. The bubbles are starting to rise. Normally in this moment, I would tell you what we're making next week, but a little bittersweet. This is our final breakfast class for the spring quarter. It's been really, really fun, and I thank all of you for joining me on a Tuesday morning, which is an odd time to get up and have class. So I appreciate you being here, and I hope that you keep making really good breakfast for yourself. We've learned a lot of really fundamental skills that go a long way to making mornings more variety and fun and delicious, hopefully. All right, so I need to always flip over my English muffin or my toast or whatever it is I'm making in my toaster, and then do it for like another half a round. That's just sort of how mine works. But that will be hot and ready when that pops up. All right. Water, if you bring your water up to a good rolling boil, that's fantastic. I don't want to keep waiting. But this is where you want it to be. When you turn it down to a simmer, there are still lots of little bubbles and little bubbles rising from the top, and it's very, very hot. So that's what we're going to look for when we turn it back down. In the meantime, toast is working. You know what? I'm going to cut my scallions just so I'm not rushing the eggs, because that is the worst thing you could do. Putting it into water that's not hot enough is definitely not going to help you, because then your egg whites are just going to go blah all over the place, because there's nothing to cook them and solidify them and bring those proteins together. So don't be like me, kids. Be patient with your boiling water. Just going to chop my scallions straight across, making nice little diced scallion chops. If you have diced, they're not diced, they're just chopped. But if you have chives, that would be really good. If you don't want to garnish with anything, that is fine too. But the additional flavor really does lend a lot to it, I think. Onion flavor, especially in the sweet, mild form of scallions or chives, it's just, I don't think that it can ruin anything. So just enhances the richness, and it kind of brings out the savory flavor in your protein if you're using protein. So as usual, I chop my scallions down, and then you can just remove the outer leaf, peel it down to the root. There's always like one outer leaf, and then just goes right back into my vase full of water. And by next week, they will be fully grown scallions again. So a little trick for you: stop spending money, and big onion corporations can, I don't know, gonna make a dad joke there, but it's okay. All right. The more water you have in a pot, the longer it will take to boil. And if you're at altitude, then it will take longer. But those are the only things that really affect water boiling. Obviously, water boils the same temperature if you're at, anywhere below like 3,000 feet, I think. Although that's kind of an interesting thing to know. My aunt who lives in Colorado has been following along with some of these videos that we post online, which is the sweetest thing ever. And she was inspired by some egg tests that I had done on soft, medium, and hard-boiled eggs. And she tried it in Colorado, and it definitely took longer. She needed a lot more time to get it finished, just because I guess the water is not at the same height of a temperature, which is really interesting because the air is thinner, I guess. Pressure is different. All of those things come into play. I wish I knew more about that. So I've got this at a really high simmer. It's still going to be simmering. I've still got it at a very high heat. It's lifting off a lot of steam, so it's evaporating. So I know that it's at about as high of a simmer as it can go at this point. It will continue coming up to a boil, but I can control that heat and keep it at this simmer by occasionally turning it down as necessary. So what I want to do is the fun part, or the really scary part. So you want to swirl your water around, just kind of choose a direction, whether that's clockwise or counterclockwise, and just sort of start moving it in that general direction. What that does is it helps create a little teeny bit of like a vortex in the middle. I'm not sure that's the right word, but like that little cyclone area right in the middle. And what we hope is that our egg will be brought into that section and kind of tightened up. And so I'm going to release this in the same direction it's going. My egg whites are pretty spread out there. You can see, probably wasn't hot enough, but what I'm going for is the center of the egg. Once it comes all together, I'm going to just, that's going to cook for about 2 minutes. And then I can skim all of it out, and any of the really, really loose bits are just going to go into the trash. But it's starting to center itself. All of that's going to get poached in the middle is going to go onto my English muffin. I'm getting my second egg ready. It definitely does matter, like how hot your water is and how ready everything was. I'm going to skim some of this off now so that it is a little easier to get my egg out. Go. That is a little bit of egg white and a lot of bit of egg foam, which kind of creates itself the proteins. They just kind of all break apart and you get this foamy substance. So I have got my poached egg here. I kind of want to look at it since there's not that much egg white with it, like a small amount of egg white. I'm just going to let it keep going a little bit, maybe 30 more seconds. Then I'm going to put this in my bowl and skim out the water and start again. When you add anything that is a different temperature, especially a colder temperature, to hot liquid like this, it's going to bring the temperature down, which is why making sure it's at a hot enough heat. Okay, so you can see my egg white all the way around is firm to the touch. It's not liquid, but my yolk right in the middle is nice and runny and jiggly. That's what I want. So I'm going to put my egg into my bowl, and I'm going to just take off some of this foam, and I'm going to let it come back up to a boil and then simmer and then do it again. Make sure this is nice and hot. Yeah, I'm getting good boiling action here, so I'm going to keep it at a simmer. Turn my water around, get my swirl going. You just try all the little tricks and see what works for you. It's definitely not an easy thing to do. That one is working much better. The water was nice and hot that time. So you see what happens when you're impatient like me. So we get a little bit of this foam on top. I'm just going to catch some of that. But that's all white. That's all still connected to the egg, so I'm going to let that all cook. Starting to come up to a bit more of a boil than I want. I want it to be simmering, so I'm going to turn my heat down to kind of control it, or else the egg whites will kind of just explode again. I want to keep this together. The thing about poaching eggs too, in this method, no matter how good you are, you lose some of the egg white. So if you get one of those little poaching pans, you are not wasting as much of your egg by having the egg white be kind of spread out. I'm gonna let that cook just another maybe 30 seconds. So, meantime, this is the final project, really, but I want to make sure that my hollandaise is ready to pour over. So I'm going to get that hot again. And I'm probably, I'm going to need to add some cream because it got real thick. You can see here I'm stirring it up. Still very well combined. I don't have any broken egg yolks, but it is very thick. So I want to add just a little bit of cream. If you want to add a little bit of water, that's fine too. Low heat. This liquid will just help thin it out and bring it back to a pourable consistency, which is what we want. I want to get my last egg out, put that in my bowl. Okay, so it's really to make sure that the whites that are attached are hard cooked and the yolk is nice and jiggly. 2 poached eggs, a little bit of egg white and a lot of it of egg foam. Okay. That is done. I'm going to bring the hollandaise over here so you can see the consistency that we're going for. Definitely want it to be pourable, but just pourable. If it's too liquidy, then obviously it's just going to run right off your eggs and form like a soup on the bottom. So you kind of want it to be thick enough to stick, but thin enough that it's still in a viscous, liquid-y state. Sort of like ketchup, that halfway point between a liquid and a solid. There's a word for that. I can't remember. So I'm just going to, a little bit more, but keeping it on the low heat and letting it come back up to a nice hot temperature is also going to help it to thin back out. A little bit more. Mine's going to be very rich today. I could be thinning it out with water, but treat yourself. Okay. Time to plate up. This is the fun part. You've got your English muffins. If you're using a protein like bacon or ham, you put it on at this point. So I'm putting on a couple pieces of my cooked bacon. I'll bring this over there to the camera to show you. Get this set up. Okay. Right? Little bit of hollandaise sauce on the bottom. Some chefs do that to keep the Canadian bacon from like slip sliding around or moving around, and that's perfectly fine. Plus then you get an extra little dollop of that delicious sauce. I'm not going to do that. This, I'm going to put on top of this my poached eggs. Just going to gently place them on top of the bacon. Your hollandaise sauce should be pourable but thick. So it glazes the spoon, but you can still kind of pour it. I'm going to just kind of rustic dollop it over. You can use a spoon. And I want to pour this right over the top. And then our scallions. And that is it. Ta-da! Super simple, except not at all gourmet, fancy breakfast. And I know we're early, kind of a quick one. That's why we like this quick hollandaise method. If you were doing the traditional method, you would want to use clarified butter. So that's a little bit more of a process, and you mix it in a hot water bath, and it's sort of a little bit different of a process. This is starting to break just because I left it on the heat without whisking it while I was plating. So it's starting to separate out a little bit of, it looks a little bit grainy. But if you catch that in time, you can try to save that by adding a little touch of water and whisking it real fast and kind of bringing it back into an emulsified state. Or it helps to kind of try to cool it down real fast, maybe a little ice chip. You know, there's a lot of different little tricks to fixing sauces and fixing things if they break. But sometimes if a sauce breaks completely, then you just have to start over. I saw there was a comment or a question that popped up. Oh, good. I'm glad it looks good. It's going to taste really delicious. I'm excited. And if there are any questions, if you guys try to make this and you have any issues, let me know. Just because we're not going to have class next week doesn't mean I'm not still going to be right here. So check our website and the Instagram page for any updates on what we're going to plan for the summer. And yeah, I hope that you sign up for whatever that is going to end up being. We definitely are going to be doing some things. It's just when that starts and what the programs will be, I'm not exactly sure yet. So keep an eye out and let me know what you guys keep cooking. Let me know if you see anything that looks amazing. Maybe we should try it in a class. Yeah, I'm really excited for you to make this. If you didn't make it this morning along with me, then let me know how it turns out for you. This is a really kind of a good troubleshoot method to make a good homemade hollandaise sauce. So, and then making it how you want it is really particular with that amount of lemon, amount of pepper, and all that kind of stuff. You can also add a hot sauce to it and have your spicy hollandaise. There's a lot of different fun things you can do once you get the method down. So I hope you all enjoy it, and I hope you've had fun so far. Thank you really all for being here and starting your day with me. I'm going to stop the recording. Do-do-do.